Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, I apologize I haven't made a video in quite some time. I kind of just lost faith in Season 5 with all the botting that was going on, and honestly, the group meta was just atrociously boring. I just couldn't do it. So, without the ability to solo progress with Paragons, I couldn't just sit there and spam G-Riffs all day long with the current group meta the way it was. But with that said, Blizzard just recently put out a huge bot ban wave, and so my faith has been restored a bit in Blizzard, and I actually am quite excited for Season 6 now. So I'm going to go ahead and make some content for Season 6 for you guys, and cover all of the kind of meta Witch Doctor builds, and all that good stuff. Now, let me go ahead and preface this by saying there's really not that many changes to Witch Doctor. The majority of the changes are just kind of number tweaks here and there. A lot of the sets got buffed numbers-wise. But as far as actual new play styles, you're not going to probably see a ton. Now, that could change. There could be, somewhere during the season, people always tend to find some new builds that, maybe some of us that have been theory crafting never thought of or didn't see coming, and that happens. But from the looks of it right now, the majority of the builds are kind of just better versions of the current builds you guys are playing in Season 5 right now. So let's get right into the Witch Doctor changes. That's pretty much all I want to talk about in this video. And again, there's really not a lot. So, as you see here, the only skill change this patch is for Grasp of the Dead. The skill rune Death is Life. Chance to summon a zombie dog increased to 70%, and then it can no longer have a chance to drop a health globe. Now, this change really has nothing to do with the Witch Doctor class itself. This is more about them kind of just doing a sweeping nerf to all abilities that generate health globes, and items as well that generate health globes. And that's really because of, if any of you guys are playing Season 5 right now, or you have played Season 5, the group meta is 3 ZDPS and a Energy Twister Wizard, with the other ZDPS generating health globes, basically so that the wizard has infinite arcane power to just spam energy twisters like crazy. And that meta is extremely boring, and I don't think it was ever intended. So they're kind of trying to make sure that doesn't happen again in Season 6. So hopefully what that means is that we're going to have a much more diverse 4-player meta in Season 6. Who knows? We may not. There's always going to be cookie cutter, the best builds, the best setup for everything. But hopefully there will be a few classes vying for DPS slots this time around. Although, again, on the PTR, Archon Wizard does look pretty crazy. But anyways, the other thing that kind of sucks about this is that, Witch Doctor does have a really good passive in Gruesome Feast that does, it's fueled by health globes. So, I don't see it being a huge issue just because, since like Season 4 with Helltooth, Zombie Bears, and Selenium, we haven't really seen a lot of like crazy health globe stuff for Witch Doctor. So I think it'll be fine, but there is potential for the nerfs to health globes to, kind of indirectly hurt Witch Doctor because of Gruesome Feast. Next up, we've got the item and set changes. So first up, we got a brand new item, the Bakuli Jungle Wraps, which is a new legendary belt. Fire Bats deals 150 to 200% increased damage to enemies affected by Locust Swarm or Piranhas. Really interesting belt. It kind of looks like a belt that they made for Arakyr, really. You can definitely run it in an LON setup, but in this patch with the buffs to the other sets, I'm not sure how good LON's really going to be at this point. So, I don't see this being that good. An Arakyr setup with Locust Swarm, which already gets buffed by the damage multiplier from the 6-piece Arakyr, along with Cloud of Bats or Plague Bats, something like that, could be a decent build. I don't see it being like anywhere close to competing with Helltooth Gargantuan, even LON Gargantuan, or even Jade Harvester in this patch for that matter. but it could be a fun kind of, thing to mess around with at the very least. What I probably will run this in is a speed Arakyr Angry Chicken build as my belt, just because the belt slot is always kind of open to whatever you want to run anyways. So being able to have your Plague Bats be dealing quite a bit more damage with this multiplier is pretty nice, and more than likely I'm going to be running Plague Bats in that setup anyways. It's going to be something probably along the lines of, Angry Chicken running around with Locust Swarm and a Wormwood in the cube dealing the majority of the damage to trash, and then when you get to an elite or champion, you're going to pop out and just Plague Bats them down, and then go back in Angry Chicken and do your thing. That's kind of what I'm toying around with currently with this. Again, as far as pushing solo or even in groups, I don't really see a Fire Bats Angry Chicken build being viable even with the belt. Next up, we got the changes to the Helltooth harness. So the bonus damage has been increased from 900% to 1400%. So currently on the PTR, this is by far and away the highest clearing solo build. I think somebody's done like a 94 with this, I believe. The Cold Gargantuans are just hitting like an absolute truck with this buff, and that's probably going to be the go-to build from the looks of it in Season 6. If you want to push solo with Witch Doctor, you're going to be running 6-piece Helltooth, and, again, mainly buffing those Cold Gargantuans to deal as much damage as possible. And it's a little bit, it kind of sucks, I feel like. I mean, that build's not that fun to play in the first place, in my opinion. And we've already played it like crazy in Season 5. And, even the LON versions are basically the same thing. So, we'll see. Jade Harvester has some potential, but I don't think Jade Harvester has the damage mitigation to necessarily compete with this. But that also remains to be seen. I mean, Jade is pretty good, which we'll get into in just a minute. The other thing to keep in mind with the Helltooth Harness buff is that one of the very best Torment 10 builds in Season 5 was 6-piece Helltooth, which basically you'd run Short Man's Finger and Tall Man's Finger to get your 3 smaller, more powerful Gargantuans, and then the big fire zombie dog. And then you'd run Mana Juma's Ceremonial Knife in the offhand and run around as a chicken while your pets just killed everything for you. And that was really fast in Torment 10 last patch. It's going to be even faster now. Like, you're just going to be one-shotting everything all the time, no matter what it is, pretty much, with this multiplier. So that more than likely is going to be, if it's not the fastest Torment 10 build, it's going to be competitive with every other Torment 10 build in Season 6 for Witch Doctor. And then we got the Arraignment of the Jade Harvester. So the 2-piece bonus, instant haunt damage dealt increased from 60 to 120 seconds worth. And then the 6-piece set bonus, instant damage dealt when consuming dots increased from 150 to 300 seconds worth. So any of you guys that played the PTR or followed the PTR for last patch, the patch we're currently playing, this is what Jade Harvester debuted at. It was at this level, and it was really good. Everybody thought Jade Harvester was going to be the set for Season 5 for pushing solo. And then they nerfed it to what it is now, the 60 seconds and 150 seconds, and pretty much gutted it at that point. Now, it actually has the potential to do well. Because even at the 60 seconds for the 2-piece and the 150 for the 6-piece, it was possible to do 80 plus with a good rift, and if you knew what you were doing, even currently in Season 5. With this change, this build should be able to push up to 90 and maybe even higher. I believe I've heard of somebody doing like an 88 or 89 on the PTR or something like that. Now, I don't know how many Paragon levels that guy had and all that good stuff, but it definitely has potential, and it's what I'm most excited about because Jade is my favorite build. So, we'll see what happens. We got the Spirit of Arakyr. 6-piece damage has been increased from 1200% to 1500%. Now again, I don't see too many implications in solo pushing builds or for group play, but the 2 main speed Torment 10 builds are going to be very, very good now with this buff. So you've got your kind of NGOM cooldown reduction setup where the majority of your damage comes from just exploding as the Angry Chicken with the Mana Juma set. Going to be really, really good. And then you've got the kind of other version where you run Wormwood in the cube with Locust Swarm, because the Spirit of Arakyr set buffs Locust Swarm as well. And you let the Locust Swarm kill pretty much all the trash. And then, like I talked about a little bit ago, probably just pop out on elites and champions and blast them down with Plague Bats a little bit and then go back into Angry Chicken. So both of those builds should be very competitive for Torment 10 farming. The one great thing about this patch is I think we're going to see 5 or 6 very fast Torment farming builds. So you kind of have some options there to play around with if you want to. Then we got the Zunimassa's Haunt changes. So the 4th set bonus, damage reduction per fetish has been increased from 2% to 3%. So a little bit more toughness there. And the 6th set bonus, damage bonus increased from 800% to 1500%. Now, on paper, you would think that this would be outperforming Helltooth potentially, but the one thing about Zuni is that you actually have to tag the enemies with a mana spender to get the damage buff. Whereas with Helltooth, all you have to do is just cast Wall of Death. Doesn't matter if you hit anything, doesn't matter where you cast it, you get a damage buff on your character. And that's one of the big differences. With that said, I think Zuni still has potential to push pretty high. I mean, I think you're probably going to have to fish a little bit harder with Zuni. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that Zuni may end up being the Carnival build. It's possible. Currently on the PTR, Carnival has some bug problems, and nobody's really messing around with it right now because of that. And unfortunately, Carnival is one of those specs that's been plagued with bugs pretty much since its inception. Basically, since the beginning of Reaper of Souls, there's always been something wrong with it seems like. And currently, there are still bugs. So if they get those bugs fixed before this goes live, Carnival Zuni has some serious potential. Now, it's going to be relatively squishy, so it's going to be definitely a very fishy spec. You're going to have to fish a lot for a good rift solo, but then it also has a lot of potential for group play. There's a very good chance that Carnival Doc with these buffs could do very well in group play, depending on how the meta goes this season. And that goes for the same with Helltooth as well. Helltooth has potential to do pretty decent in group play as well. And then we got the Swampland Waiters have had a legendary effect added to them. Sacrifice now deals 350 to 400% additional damage to targets affected by Locust Swarm or Grasp of the Dead. Now, as far as, again, solo progression builds, probably not going to be great. I mean, you can really only run this in Legacy of Nightmares builds, because Sacrifice does not get a multiplier from any other Witch Doctor set, which is unfortunate. So you're looking at trying to run it in LON, which, for pushing, I don't see it happening, but for Torment 10, it's actually quite good. I've been messing around with very similar to the Walker build from last season, where you're just kind of walking around letting your pets and Locust Swarm kill everything. But instead, you run the Swampland Waiters and a Homunculus, and then on Elites and Champions, you just nuke them down really fast with Sacrifice. So it plays pretty much the same way. You kind of just walk around until you get to the Elite or Champion, and then you just spam your Sacrifice. And I run it with a Sacrifice that gives you a damage buff. So then as you're walking around after the Elite and Champion pack, your pets and your Locust Swarm are buffed tremendously to kill the trash really quick without having to stop too much. And it's actually quite effective and probably one of the better Torment 10 builds, honestly, which I will make a video on at some point. But other than that, I don't see too many other implications for these, except for maybe really early on in the season or something, if you get them early on as a drop. Now, one last thing I want to talk about that isn't exclusive to Witch Doctor, but it is a huge buff across the board for all of our pet builds, is the change to Enforcer. Pet damage reduction increased from 25% to 90%. And then the damage bonus granted to pets is now multiplicative with other sources of bonus damage. But the first part is so good, because anybody that's playing currently in Season 5 with Gargantuans, the higher you go, the more your Gargantuans just get wrecked by things. and this should take care of a lot of that problem. And when the Gargs are your damage, that is your main source of damage. I mean, that's basically it in those builds. It's the Gargs. And when you die and they're on cooldown, you know, you're still going to have that problem. But as long as you're alive, they should be alive way more often, unless you're pushing just really, really high content with them. You shouldn't have an issue where you only have 1 or 2 Gargantuans alive near as often, and it's just a huge buff, man. It's a great quality of life change. It's one of the most frustrating things currently in the game, seeing your Gargantuans die, and hopefully you won't see it near as much in Season 6. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it can give you a little bit of insight into the patch. There's really not a whole lot to talk about. I will be making some videos very soon. I'm going to go over all the changes to the gyms here soon, and being put out a lot of Torment 10 and solo pushing builds in the next week or so. So anyways, thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.